Good evening, everybody, and welcome back. As promised, today we are going to be back in the F-18, flying with OverKill, the startup, taxi, and takeoff. I'm going to jump right into it. So the first thing we're going to do is, as usual, go through our controls. All right, I'm going to go ahead and lock the camera so we don't see it flying around in the back. Let's go to Adjust Controls. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do things a bit differently on this one. I'm going to see how well this works. We're going to go through everything that I have mapped on my HOTAS, and hopefully that'll help you guys out. Okay. So I have the Thrustmaster Warthog for a reference, guys, and here's how we're going to do it. I'm just going to work my way up the stick first. So on the paddle switch, we have A here. You want to map your autopilot nose wheel steering disengage on the paddle switch. Moving up to the pinky button here, you want to make sure you have your nose wheel steering switch. Now this is a nose wheel steering increase, or a maneuvering range increase, so you have nose wheel steering low by default. And then as long as the S key is depressed, or whatever button you map, as long as that key is held down, your nose wheel steering range will increase dramatically. So, and I'll show you guys what that looks like when we get to taxiing on down the road here. Moving up to the trigger, we have our gun trigger detent for the second detent on the trigger. This is just to fire the gun and release missiles when you're in your whatever primary weapon is selected. You have your weapons release button, so this is for pickling weapons, bombs, etc. Moving up to the sensor control switch, so the little gray hat on the stick, you guys are going to want to map all of these. So you have your sensor control switch aft, depress, forward, left, and right. They are critical. You are definitely going to need them. And speaking of critical, let's move up to the weapons. You have your AMRAAM, gun, sidewinder, and sparrow. These are going to be critical for air-to-air modes of combat. Okay. And then finally, you also have your radar elevation control up, radar elevation control down. This allows you to point the radar up and down as you're scanning through the sky. And then finally, definitely going to need the trim. So you have left wing down, pull back for climb, push forward for descent, and right wing down. All right, and then finally on the stick we have the recce event marker, and what this allows you to do is to quickly turn on or off the helmet mounted display once it's turned on the front control panel. And again, I'll show you guys that definitely later. You'll get to see all that in action. Okay, moving over to the throttle, some things that you might want to have is you have landing gear down, landing gear up, you have your flaps to half, flaps auto, and finally flaps full. These are the ones that you need to map specifically if you guys have your flap controls. Okay, don't worry about all this stuff in between necessarily unless you really need to use them, you know, based on individual standpoint. But I also highly recommend RS Mapper, guys. Check out my video on my channel for that. It's a great key binding software that makes using all of this stuff really easy because it has the push, which for example this is a press, and then when I release the button, flaps half, so it matches the indication on the actual aircraft. So just a neat thing to think about. Okay, so moving on, we have the speed brake extend, speed brake retract. You're going to want your raid FLIR field of view select button. So for example on the Maverick, you know, you have your two different view modes, and we'll see that later, but you can actually zoom in a little bit, set the zoom setting. This allows you to bounce back and forth between them very quickly without having to take your hands off the controls and push the buttons on the DDIs. Then you have your cage uncage button. Again, perfect example is the Maverick Foxtrot. The AGM-65F is a TV guided Maverick, and in order to actually be able to slew the camera around and find your target with it, you have to uncage it. So that's one example of what this button would be used for. Okay. You have your dispense switch aft. So this is your flares that we were talking about earlier. Dispense switch forward is echo on the keyboard for your chaff. Okay, getting into the engines, you have left engine idle with right alt and home, left engine cutoff with right alt and end. So we'll press right alt and home to get the engine turned on, right alt and end to shut it down. And then the same thing with the right engine. You have idle and off. I think I said left or right here. I don't remember. You guys can see it right here. Forgive me, it's late at night, so if I say weird shit, that's why. Let's see here. I think that's pretty much it that I have. That's a requirement for you guys. I would also recommend binding your comms 1 and 2. I put these on the mic hat on the throttle. And I think this was for a finger lift. If you guys choose to use that, I'll show you guys that afterwards, just to make getting to mill power a little bit easier. I don't use it anymore, but that is an option as well. All right. So that sums up the controls. Now let's get into starting this bad boy. So the first thing I'm going to do is come down here to the bottom panel here, and we're going to switch the battery on. I'm going to come over here to the left, start the APU. While the APU is starting, we're going to left click and hold, bring the canopy down. And it hits the rail, and wait for it to lock all the way forward and let go. Alright, while the APU is starting, we're going to go ahead and switch our INS over to the ground. APU, once you get the green light, we're ready to go. So I'm going to right click the engine crank switch to start cycling the right engine. Looking at our IFE panel, we're watching for 20 to 24 RPMs. And once we do, we'll press our right shift and home. Now, brings the right engine out of cutoff and into idle. By doing so, we are inducing fuel into the engine. There's our master caution light. We'll clear it in just a minute. We're going to bring up our DDIs while the right engine's spooling up. Brightness knob on the HUD. Brightness knob on the UFC. Right DDI. And brightness knob on the AMPCD. Alright, so the engine has stabilized at 65 RPMs. The engine crank switch has returned to the center position now that the left engine is, or right engine is stable, so we'll left click and start cycling the left engine. Okay, it's good to go, so right alt and home. While that's starting up, we can bring up our formation lights and our position lights. Said that backwards, but you guys got the point. That is actually one other switch that I forgot to mention, guys, so real quick is this guy here, your exterior lights off switch and your exterior lights on switch. And what this is the, I don't know if I can be able to see it, this little switch right here on the left side of the throttle. It allows you to, with a click of the button, disable the exterior lights. Okay, so you obviously want to turn your lights off when you're heading into a hot zone. Okay, so we've got the bit running on the right MFD or DDI. I'm going to say that all the time, so just get used to it. We're going to go ahead and hit stop. Alright, and we're going to come over here, hit menu, and this is pretty much preference from here. But I'm going to go menu. I like to have my HSI up on the right DDI. I typically set my EWR on the AMPCD. And speaking of the EWR, we're going to come down here. You can see ALR 67 power. We're going to fire that on, and we're just going to hit the bit test. Okay? And it'll run through a bit, make all kinds of weird sounds and noise like that. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to clear our master caution by pressing it. Now, you can see that the warnings that we have here on the left DDI are sort of screwed up all over the place. So what we're going to do is press that master caution, hold it again, and it restacks them. Okay, just like that. Now you can see FCS flaps off, ailerons off. So let's check our FCS page. We pressed menu once, and you can see FCS here in the bottom right. These are all of our flight control surfaces. Okay. So here we have our leading edge flaps, our tail edge flaps. So the leading edge flaps are, I paused the screen, these guys right here, right in the front of the wing there. And then the tail edge flaps are obviously the large flaps on the back side of the wing. You have your ailerons and your rudders and your horizontal stabilizer, or vertical stabilizer, excuse me. No, horizontal. Gosh, I can't talk like again. Sorry guys, I'm tired. So the stabilizer this is what allows us to go up and down. This gives us our yaw, our roll left and right, and then obviously just stability for the flaps and slowing us down. The big thing to look at here are these X's. These X's indicate that there's an issue, there's an error with the surface. All right, and that's why when we first started up the aircraft, I don't know if you guys heard it, we had that lady come on and say, flight controls. All right, and what she's telling us to do is to come right down here, and you can see FCS reset, and we're going to press that. And you can see that those X's are now all gone. And the next thing we can do, because we're not going to arm the aircraft, we're just going to come over here and hit our takeoff trim. So there's that push button down, and you can see your stabilizer trim has now, our stabilizers have now gone up to 12 degrees climb. Alright, so we're done with the FCS page for now. And typically on the left DDI, I typically have my stores up, unless I'm going air to air, which is a whole different bag of worms. Alright, so coming over here, we can see on the right DDI that we have a 0.5 quality and OK. So we can switch our INS here over to nav, and you can see now the timer is gone and we're ready to roll. So coming down here, we're going to uncage our standby ADI. So I'm just going to roll the mouse wheel back a little bit. Boom! And you can see it's already centered on the horizon. So that's done. Next thing is we'll set our radar altimeter. So we'll set it to 300 feet. So you guys heard that tone. What will happen is if we drop below 300 feet now, that tone will go off. Now we are going to give it a test, so we're just going to left click and hold it. Looking for that green light, let go, test complete. Okay, easy peasy. Alright, and then what we can do here, now, again, flying with overkill, not by the book, but I always used to forget to turn this on, so now I've made it part of my startup procedures. You guys can take the dispenser switch, flip it to on. You still can't dispense any chaff and flare unless your master arm is on, so you're good there. And then I like to set my ECM to start as receive. Okay, it allows me to receive indications of threats to the aircraft. Alright, and we'll do one more quick flow around here. Next thing we want to do is cycle our flaps to half. Okay, and you can see the flaps indication here. You also have your nose gear indication lights here, so nose, left, right. So if for any reason you drop your landing gear and one of those is out, let you know you do have a problem. As we were talking before, if we go to the IFE panel, we do have our engine RPM, our temperature, fuel flow in hundreds of pounds, and then we have our exhaust nozzle positions, just like we described in the previous video, and oil pressure indication. Here's the fuel quantity that I was telling you guys about, and we'll go over the different modes in a later video, this keeping it basic today. So we have 10,720 pounds, and you can see that on both indications. If we had external tanks, what the hell, let's throw them on. So we'll come up, hit our radio switch, F8 ground crew, rearm and refuel, and just because it looks cool, if we're going to do it, let's do it right. Throw a couple missiles on there, and the cool thing about the rearm window is we can actually remove pylons. So we'll clear those pylons. And actually, nope, that one's not true. We want fuel tank on 3. We'll just do the wing tanks for today. We will remove that pylon and add fuel here. Okay.
Request rearming. Copy.
I'll just give them a minute to finish changing our loadout. There's one tank. There's 2 tanks. Removing the pylons like we asked them to. There's 1 AIM-9. And there's 2 AIM-9s. Okay. So now if we come in here, and what also I should have stayed in the aircraft, what we might have heard was another flight controls warning, but that will happen when the weights and balances change on the aircraft. So, but if we go to the FCS page, as long as you don't see any errors, we're still good to go. Alright? So we can come back to stores, and now you can see we have our AIM-9 X-rays, you can see fuel here. But what I wanted to show you guys was this. So now look at our fuel difference here. So we have 160 pounds total fuel on board, and then 10,670 internal fuel. Alright, so this is what the aircraft is storing without any external tanks. Alright, so the next thing we're going to want to do is set our bingo fuel. That will hear a bingo alert when we drop below a certain fuel level. In my case, our squadron's default is 3,000 pounds. So basically at 3,000 pounds, it lets us know, hey, it's time to think about heading back home. Alright, here's the zone. We have our current local time. We hit zone, which puts us into Zulu time. And we'll go into why that's important at a later time, but long story short, for time on target. And we have a clock timer, so that's to press it once to start it, press it once to pause it, press and hold, clears it. Okay, So easy stuff, nothing real fancy there, just figured you guys like to see that. While we're here, let's go ahead and talk about the HUD for a minute. Now this is only for navigation mode. Up here we have our E bracket. That's all I'm going to tell you right now because we're going to get into the E bracket when it's time to talk about landing the aircraft. You have our heading tape. We have our heading caret. Wherever this guy's underneath, that's where the aircraft's current heading is. We have our flight path indicator, or velocity vector indicator, VVI. But everyone just calls it the flight path indicator, so we'll keep it simple. Basically, long story short, if you don't know already, wherever this circle is on, that's where the aircraft is going to end up. So if you see this circle on a tree as it is right now, if we were to push forward, we're going to hit that tree. Okay, then you have your horizon line. When the flight path indicator is in line with the horizon line, you're in level flight. Beneath this, we have our aircraft datum. The aircraft datum tells us where the actual nose of the aircraft is pointing. There's a reference of the nose. It's not where we're necessarily flying, it's just where the nose is pointing at. So you can see that it's below the flight path indicator, so if we were to go out to the aircraft, you can see that the nose sort of slopes downward, and that's why we have that difference there. Left side we have current airspeed, right side we have our current altitude according to barometric pressure. This little guy up here tells us our ascent and descent rate. So if you have a negative number, if it says negative 500, you are descending at 500 feet per minute. If it says 500 without the negative symbol, so it's a positive number, we are climbing at 500 feet per minute. Down here we have our current angle of attack of negative 1.1 degrees, and again that's because of the pitch of the nose. The nose is always pitching down. We have our pitch scale here. Hashed lines means you're descending. Up here we would see solid lines indicating a increase or a climb in altitude. Again, we have our time according to Zulu, if I'm not mistaken. Over here we have our nose wheel steering indicator. If I press that Sierra key or S key, you guys can see that it switches to nose wheel high, but if I let go of it, it goes back to nose wheel low. Then we have our bank scale in 5, 15, 30, and 45 degrees moving up. The upside down triangle here indicating what our current bank is. Okay, that pretty much sums up the HUD for navigation mode. We can go ahead and left click on our stick to bring it back up. We can arm our ejection seat now. If you're interested in it, you can hit right shift P to bring up the pilot's body. We are ready to stow our parking brake. Taxi light on. Anti-skid is already set. Let's do a quick flow here. Let's actually kick that guy back. Oh, we do need our oxygen. Always do your flows, guys. Double check your work and make sure you got everything where it's supposed to be. We can put our radar in standby mode for now. We're not going to need it today, but what the hell, we'll throw it on there. Oh, this is another one. So, quote unquote, it shouldn't be needed. But for whatever reason in DCS, I'm not sure if this is a bug or if it's by design, whatever. I'm not putting anyone at fault, I'm just telling you how to solve it. It doesn't seem to matter what time of year you're flying in, what altitude you fly at, you always wind up getting a darn anti-ice warning. So what I like to do is before takeoff, I'll throw my pitot heat on and my engine heat on, and that keeps me from getting the warning because it actually does come up as a master caution. So to save yourself some time and effort, just throw those on before you leave the deck. Alright. Alright, and that completes the startup of the F-18C Hornet, guys. So let's go ahead and get rolling. So, first thing I'm going to do, and I'll go ahead and bring up the controls indicator, is I'm just going to add a little power till she gets rolling, and then I'm going to bring her right back. So taxiing now. Now to show you guys the difference in nose wheel steering, so I'm going to start turning now and watch that indicator on the bottom left there, and now I'm going to press the Sierra key, and you guys can see how drastic the change is. Notice I didn't change the rudder position. All I did was press that button down, so my feet were in the exact same place. So it's a very significant change. Okay, taxiing a little fast, but what the heck, right? Who says F-18s can't be in NASCAR? Alright, and what I like to do is press nose wheel high and then start my turn. It just makes it easier to manage it. Notice I'm still holding it down because I know I've got another 90-degree turn coming up here. Center line with the runway here. And then once I get close enough, I mean, you can let go and then just sort of use your minor corrections there. Alright. Center line down the runway there, looking good. Okay, so we know our takeoff trim is set, and we can verify that by coming back to our FCS page. Alright, so we are up 12 degrees. Now, this process will change if you're on a carrier, but I don't want to confuse anyone, so I'm not going to discuss it yet. So, everything I'm about to say is strictly for taking off on deck, or on the ground. So let's go ahead and get us back to my storage page just because I like it. Alright, so here's what I'm going to do. My process is I'm going to, holding the brakes, I'm going to throttle up to 85 RPMs. Once I can confirm the engines are stable, I'm going to release the brakes, then go to mill power. For those of you who don't know, mill power is as fast as the aircraft can go without lighting the afterburners. In the case of the F-18, we'll see the RPMs reach 100. The second they reach 100, you're in mill power. If you continue pushing the throttle forward, you're going to light the afterburners. Now, the F-18 doesn't have any visual indication to tell you that the afterburners are lit. So you just need to, A, sort of pay attention to how fast she's accelerating, listen to the sounds, and then just, learning the bird. It takes a little bit of practice. There are a couple tips that I can show you guys after we've taken off that may help you secure that you are in mill power. But we're going to do a mill power roll. Okay. Once the airspeed indicator here comes alive, so by comes alive I mean once it starts counting up, I'm going to tap the paddle switch, or the A key, to disable the nose wheel steering, and we're going to steer strictly with the vertical stabilizers back here. You can see the rudder sticking out there. Okay. Once the aircraft reaches approximately 150-160 knots, what's going to happen is she's going to pick herself up off the ground. I don't have to give any pullback. Now, you can add a little bit if it makes you feel better, but I'm going to show you guys the way that it's to be done by design. Okay, you actually don't have to pull back on the stick. If your trim is set properly, she'll come off on her own once she reaches the proper speed. Once we get a positive rate of climb, so our altitude starts increasing, we will bring the gear up, bring the flaps up, climb up 8 degrees, and take her up to a couple thousand feet, and call it a day. And I'll show you guys the different settings that we can look at inside the DCS main menu. Alright, so without further ado and tuck on, let's throttle up to 85. And also, if for any reason your takeoff trim is not set, you'll get an audible warning that will say takeoff trim. Alright, so that's close enough. Definitely set. So we're going to go brakes, 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 releasing the brakes, climb up to mill. Rudder, keep her on center line here. Alright, airspeed's alive, tapping the A key, kicking our left rudder over. Not sure what happened there. Oh, I can tell you what happened. Our engines are not equalized. Left engine accelerated before the right did. Have to look at that later. Alright, so without any input from me, she picked herself up, landing gear up, flaps up. There's our radar altimeter warning because we're below the desired altitude. Climbing 8 degrees. And we're looking for that 350 knots or so. Alright, and if we were in a combat AO at this point, if we got close, we would tick our external lights master switch. You can see that fall back. And if we go to the outside of the aircraft, you can see all the lights are now off. I'll flip that switch forward, they come on. So real quick, easy way to go dark. Alright guys, well I really hope you enjoyed the startup taxi and takeoff tutorial. Let's go ahead and get out of the aircraft and take a look at some things that are in the DCS menu that might interest you. Alright. So I'll catch you guys in just a second. Alright, so we're here at the DCS menu. We went up to settings, then we're going to special. Now we're going to come down and find the F-18. And this is the one that you want to watch. So a realistic TDC slew, I really recommend, unless you guys are pros and understand what it does, disabling this. What it means is that in order to move your target designator, move the cameras on the Maverick, whatever it may be, you must depress the button and then move your slew around. And you have to hold that button down while the slew is moving. And it's kind of a pain in the ass, truth be told. So I do recommend disabling that for people who aren't familiar with the aircraft. Your HMD render in both eyes. This is specifically for VR users. And then this one here is the afterburner detent. So you can set it to only carrier. So only when you're on the carrier the afterburner detent exists. So the afterburner detent is that O key by default, where you can push the throttle all the way forward, but if you don't have that O key depressed, your afterburners won't come on. And you can set it to either only on the carrier or always on. So you'll never be able to push it in afterburners unless you are holding the O key down or whatever keybind you set in your throttle at the time that you're pushing the throttle forward. Okay, so if you are struggling with getting the aircraft to mill power without going into the afterburners, this might be something that you want to look into. But other than that, guys, that's really all I have for you for today's course. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Leave a comments and questions in the field below. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Ring that bell for me so that way you guys get notified of future content. There's going to be a lot coming out very quickly for the Hornet. I'll see you guys in the next one.